On March 13th, 2026, the President of the United States made a public request that no American commander-in-chief has made in the modern era. According to Bloomberg, Trump called for countries, including China, to send warships to help reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Read that sentence again. The United States, which operates the largest, most expensive, and most technologically advanced Navy in human history, a Navy whose cumulative investment exceeds multiple trillions of dollars according to Congressional Budget Office data, is asking other nations to send their ships into a waterway that American naval power alone has guaranteed for over 4 decades. That single request tells you more about the operational reality inside the Persian Gulf right now than any Pentagon briefing, any Central Command update, or any presidential statement since Operation Epic Fury was launched on February 28th, as confirmed by United States Central Command's own public release. The war is now in its 3rd week. Associated Press reporting from March 14th confirms that Iran is threatening UAE ports as the conflict continues to expand. Reuters, reporting from March 13th, documents that Brent crude oil has reached $103.89 per barrel, with tankers sitting anchored in Muscat, Oman, as Iran has vowed to close the Strait of Hormuz. Bloomberg's Hormuz tracker reports that a second Dynacom oil tanker has passed through the strait while other shipping owners are holding back. The phrase, "other owners hold back," describes the commercial reality that the world's most critical energy choke point is now a waterway that most shipping companies will not enter. Reuters published a headline on the same day that captures the operational environment with journalistic precision. Sneaking oil past Iran's mines and missiles. Not transiting, not shipping. Sneaking. That word choice, from the world's largest wire service, describes a maritime environment where passage through the strait is no longer a routine commercial operation, but an act that requires evasion of weapon systems deployed specifically to prevent it. Within this environment, the United States Navy operates warships carrying thousands of American service members. And among those warships, the amphibious assault ships of the America class represent a specific category of vulnerability that the geography of the Persian Gulf, the weapons deployed within it, and the doctrine designed to exploit both have created. The USS Tripoli is an America-class amphibious assault ship. According to Congressional Research Service reporting on Navy amphibious warfare programs, the vessel cost approximately $3.4 billion to build. It displaces over 44,000 tons at full load. Its flight deck supports F-35B Lightning II stealth fighters, MV-22 Osprey tilt-rotor aircraft, and CH-53E Super Stallion helicopters. It carries a Marine contingent that can number between 1,700 and 2,500 personnel depending on mission configuration. By every conventional metric of naval capability, it is among the most powerful warships afloat. The Persian Gulf is the single worst geographic environment on Earth for a ship of its size. That is not editorial commentary. It is the documented assessment published through the United States Naval War College, the Naval Postgraduate School, and studies commissioned by the Office of Naval Research across decades of research into Gulf naval operations. The Gulf measures approximately 990 kilometers in length and 340 kilometers at its widest point. Its average depth is roughly 50 meters, with a maximum depth of approximately 90 meters. According to the International Institute for Strategic Studies, these dimensions mean that large warships with deep drafts are constrained to specific navigable channels. The water is too shallow, the space too confined, and the distances to hostile coastline too short for a 44,000-ton vessel to exploit the maneuverability and standoff range that make it dominant in open ocean. 140 miles of the Gulf's northern shore belongs to Iran. Every point within the Gulf sits within the published range of Iranian anti-ship missile systems. The Congressional Research Service has documented Iran's anti-ship inventory in multiple assessments. The North Sea skimming cruise missile at approximately 120 kilometers range. The Gator at approximately 200 kilometers. The Khalij-E-Fars anti-ship ballistic missile at approximately 300 kilometers, designed to strike large naval vessels using terminal guidance. These systems are deployed in fixed coastal batteries and on mobile launchers that can reposition along Iran's coastline within hours. But the anti-ship missiles on Iran's coastline are not the threat that naval analysts describe as the most operationally challenging for a vessel like the Tripoli. The most challenging threat is smaller, cheaper, more numerous, and specifically designed for this body of water. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy operates a force structurally distinct from Iran's conventional navy. According to the International Institute for Strategic Studies Military Balance and Analysis published by the Office of Naval Intelligence, the IRGC Navy maintains a fleet of fast attack craft, fast inshore attack craft, and armed small boats numbering between 1,000 and 1,500 vessels of various types. These range from missile-armed fast attack craft to semi-rigid inflatable boats carrying machine guns, rocket-propelled grenades, and short-range anti-ship missiles. These vessels are based across a network of ports, harbors, coves, and concealed anchorages distributed along Iran's Gulf coastline and on the islands Iran controls within the strait: Abu Musa, Greater Tunb, and Lesser Tunb. According to analysis published by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, many of these basing locations use natural terrain features, caves, and covered facilities that provide concealment from satellite and aerial surveillance. The boats can be stored ashore, moved overland on trailers, and launched from beaches and commercial docks, operationally indistinguishable from civilian maritime infrastructure. On March 11th, United States Central Command issued a public warning telling civilians to avoid ports used by Iranian forces. That warning, published on CENTCOM's official website, confirms that Iranian naval forces are operating from port facilities across the Gulf in a manner that requires civilian populations to be alerted. The warning is not precautionary. It is responsive to an operational condition where Iranian naval assets are actively deploying from dispersed locations throughout the theater. The tactical doctrine for employing this dispersed fleet has been studied by every major Western defense research institution. The doctrine employs simultaneous attack by dozens of small craft approaching from multiple vectors at high speed, each carrying a relatively small weapons loadout. No single craft poses a survivable threat to a warship with layered defenses. The doctrine does not rely on a single craft. It relies on volume. The defense problem, created by a swarm of 30, 50, or 100 small boats approaching simultaneously from multiple bearings in confined waters with significant civilian traffic, is qualitatively different from defending against a single missile or a single vessel. The defending ship's combat system must detect, track, classify, and engage each incoming threat individually. Classification, determining whether each radar contact is hostile or civilian, is the critical bottleneck. The Gulf supports one of the densest concentrations of small boat traffic in the world. Thousands of fishing boats, cargo dhows, and commercial craft operate across these waters at any given time. Distinguishing a military fast attack craft from a civilian fishing vessel at radar range in this environment is an identification challenge that the Office of Naval Intelligence has acknowledged. The United States Navy tested exactly this scenario in its own wargame, and the result has been studied in defense institutions ever since. Millennium Challenge. 2002 was a major joint military exercise costing approximately $250 million, according to reporting by the Armed Forces Journal. Lieutenant General Paul Van Riper, a retired Marine Corps three-star general, commanded the opposing force, simulating a Middle Eastern adversary in a scenario geographically modeled on the Persian Gulf. On the first day of free play, Van Riper launched a coordinated swarm attack using fast boats, shore-based missiles, and unconventional communications. According to Van Riper's own public account, published in interviews with PBS Frontline and referenced in RAND Corporation analysis, the attack sank 16 warships in the simulation, including an aircraft carrier and 2 amphibious assault ships. Simulated casualties exceeded 20,000. That simulation was conducted 24 years ago. The IRGC Navy's fast attack fleet is larger and better armed now than the capabilities Van Riper simulated. The geographic conditions of the Gulf have not changed. The water is still 50 meters deep. The strait is still 21 miles wide. And the operational environment, as of the third week of March 2026, has added dimensions that the 2002 exercise did not model. The current conflict has already demonstrated that the operational environment produces casualties and equipment losses through mechanisms that pre-war planning did not adequately anticipate. On March 12th, a United States KC-135 Stratotanker was lost over Iraq. Central Command confirmed the loss in a public release on March 12th. By March 13th, CENTCOM confirmed that all 6 crew members were deceased. The KC-135 is a refueling aircraft, the logistical platform that extends the operational range of fighter aircraft conducting missions across the theater. Its loss represents not only 6 American lives, but a reduction in the tanker capacity that enables sustained air operations. On March 2nd, 3 United States F-15E Strike Eagles were involved in what Central Command's own public release described as a friendly fire incident in Kuwait. The pilot survived, but 3 advanced fighter aircraft, each valued at approximately $87.7 million according to Air Force budget documentation, were lost to a targeting error within the coalition's own defensive network. $263 million in aircraft eliminated not by Iranian weapons, but by the fog and confusion of operating multiple defensive systems simultaneously in a compressed threat environment. Reuters reported on March 13th that fuel shortages from the war have begun to threaten global food supply. Bloomberg reported the same day that oil has hit $100 in the second week of the war, and that Trump's quick war is turning into a test of endurance. Bloomberg also published analysis from Iranian-American scholar Vali Nasr, stating that Tehran believes time is on its side and that a prolonged conflict can alter Washington's calculus. Every day the conflict continues. The economic pressure on every oil-importing nation intensifies, while Iran's strategy of sustained, distributed, low-cost operations continues to function regardless of which individual commanders or systems are eliminated. The Marine contingent aboard an amphibious assault ship like the Tripoli adds a dimension to the vulnerability calculation that no other warship type carries. The Marines, numbering up to 2,500, are aboard the ship as passengers during transit. They are not part of the ship's defensive capability. They cannot contribute to missile defense or close-in weapons engagement from inside a well deck or a berthing compartment. In a swarm engagement scenario, 2,500 Marines represent 2,500 additional personnel at risk on a platform whose defensive systems are under saturation pressure in waters where maneuverability is constrained by depth and width. Captain Wayne Hughes of the United States Naval Postgraduate School, whose work Fleet Tactics and Naval Operations remains one of the most cited texts in naval strategy, argued that in confined and littoral waters, the advantage shifts decisively from large, expensive platforms to numerous, smaller, cheaper weapon systems, attacking from multiple vectors simultaneously. Hughes concluded that the geographic constraints of the operating environment, not the capability of the defending platform, determine the tactical outcome when the attacker possesses sufficient volume. The cost exchange dimension connects directly to the sustainability question that the third week of this conflict has made urgent. A single IRGC fast attack craft costs between $500,000 and several $1 million depending on type. A semi-rigid inflatable armed with rocket-propelled grenades costs a fraction of that. Against these costs, the Tripoli's defensive systems expend interceptors costing approximately $900,000 per RIM 116 rolling airframe missile round and approximately $2.1 million per RIM 162 evolved Sea Sparrow missile, according to Navy budget documentation. Each defensive engagement against a cheap attacking platform consumes ammunition from a fixed magazine that cannot be reloaded during combat. Bloomberg reported on March 13th that the Magnificent Seven technology stocks have entered correction territory as both artificial intelligence concerns and Iran war risks mount simultaneously. Reuters reported that Wall Street closed lower as the war fueled inflation worries. Gold reached $5,021 per ounce, according to Kitco market data from March 13th, a figure that reflects the global market's assessment of risk levels across every asset class. When gold is at $5,000, the market is pricing in sustained instability that extends beyond any single theater or any single military engagement. The Associated Press reported on March 14th that Iran has begun threatening UAE ports specifically, expanding the geographic scope of its maritime operations beyond the strait itself into the broader Gulf. The report that fire and smoke were rising from an oil facility in Fujairah, documented by AP Photography on March 14th, confirms that infrastructure along the Gulf's southern coast, the coast belonging to American partner nations, is under active attack. Fujairah sits outside the Strait of Hormuz on the Gulf of Oman side, meaning Iran's operational reach extends beyond the strait choke point into the waters that were supposed to provide an alternative to Hormuz-dependent shipping routes. This geographic expansion directly affects the operational calculus for any naval vessel operating in Gulf waters. A ship that can avoid the strait itself cannot avoid the broader Gulf if Iranian weapon systems reach into both bodies of water. The Fujairah attack demonstrates that they do. Historical combat in these waters reinforces the pattern. On May 17, 1987, the USS Stark, an Oliver Hazard Perry-class frigate, was struck by two Exocet anti-ship missiles while operating in the Persian Gulf, killing 37 American sailors. On April 14, 1988, the USS Samuel B. Roberts struck an Iranian mine that blew a 4.5-meter hole in its hull and nearly sank the vessel. Both incidents occurred in the same confined waters where current operations are unfolding. Both demonstrated that weapons costing a fraction of the ships they struck can produce catastrophic damage when geography eliminates the standoff distance that large warships depend upon for survivability. Anthony Kordsman at the Center for Strategic and International Studies has documented the cost exchange dynamic specific to Gulf naval operations, concluding that the combination of confined geography, numerous cheap offensive platforms, and expensive defensive interceptors creates a structural imbalance favoring the force that optimizes for cost over the force that optimizes for capability. That structural imbalance does not change with additional spending on the defensive side because the fundamental ratio between a $500,000 fast boat and a $3.4 billion amphibious ship operates in one direction regardless of budget. The fact that the President of the United States has publicly asked other nations, including China, to send warships to help secure the Strait of Hormuz is the single most significant indicator of the operational challenge this environment presents. America has not asked for naval assistance in the Persian Gulf since the reflagging operations of 1987 and 1988 during the Iran-Iraq War. That America is asking now, in the third week of a conflict it initiated, with 2 carrier strike groups deployed, and the USS Gerald R. Ford having transited the Suez Canal on March 5th, according to CENTCOM's own photography, means that the force already committed is assessed as insufficient for the combined mission of prosecuting operations against Iran while simultaneously securing the maritime environment through which the world's energy supply flows. Reuters described the current oil market situation with a phrase that captures the structural nature of the problem. Historic oil reserve release is only a band-aid on a gaping supply shock. Strategic petroleum reserves, the emergency stockpiles nations maintain for exactly this type of crisis, are being drawn down across multiple countries simultaneously. But reserves are finite. They are measured in days of consumption, not months. They buy time. They do not solve the underlying supply disruption caused by a strait that commercial shipping will not enter without insurance, that underwriters will not provide for waters where mines and missiles have been documented. Every day the strait remains commercially closed. The pressure on every government to find a resolution increases, not because of ideology, but because their populations experience the closure as rising fuel costs, rising electricity bills, and rising food prices. Reuters reported on March 13th that fuel shortages from the war have begun to threaten global food supply, connecting the military operations in the Gulf directly to agricultural production chains that depend on petroleum-based fertilizers, diesel-powered farming equipment, and oil-fueled transportation networks. A $3.4 billion amphibious assault ship carrying 2,500 Marines operates within a body of water 340 kilometers wide, 50 meters deep, bounded on one side by 140 miles of hostile coastline armed with anti-ship missiles, patrolled by over 1,000 small attack craft operating from dispersed, concealed positions, seeded with mines that cost less than a used automobile and connected to open ocean, only through a 21-mile strait that the world's largest shipping companies will no longer transit. The Navy that built this ship and trained these Marines is now publicly asking other nations to send their warships to help. That request, documented by Bloomberg on March 13, 2026, is the operational assessment expressed as a diplomatic necessity. The geography has not changed in 40 years. The weapons that exploit it have become cheaper, more numerous, and more precise. And the gap between what the world's most expensive Navy was designed to do in open water and what the Persian Gulf's confined dimensions allow it to do is measured not in capability, but in physics, in depth charts, in coastline distances, and in the cost ratio between the platforms defending and the weapons attacking in a body of water whose dimensions cannot be altered by any appropriation.